Plugging her husband's tablet into the charger that morning, Sarah just wanted to get back to making breakfast. But the screen suddenly lit up, and she couldn't help but glance at it. Reading the message, she froze, unable to move a muscle. Ricotta pancakes were turning golden brown in the cast-iron skillet. Sarah carefully flipped each one with a spatula, making sure the bottoms were perfectly seared. The crust was golden and even exactly the way Ryan liked them. Early in their marriage, he had mentioned that his mother's pancakes were always either raw in the middle or tough as shoe leather, and that if Sarah was going to make them, she should do it right. So she tried to do it right. The French press on the counter was steeping, and Sarah managed to press the plunger down at the exact second the coffee reached its perfect dark brew. The smell of roasted coffee mixed with the aroma of vanilla and sweet ricotta. For the first time that morning, true peace settled over the kitchen. From the nursery, a quiet, rhythmic breathing could be heard. Liam was sleeping on his side, a tiny fist tucked under his cheek. Over these past 4 months, Sarah had memorized his breathing. When her baby boy was waking up, his breaths grew slightly deeper and irregular, as if he hadn't quite decided whether he was ready to face the day. Right now, his breathing was steady and calm, giving her a moment to breathe herself. It gave her time to finish the pancakes, pour her husband a cup of coffee, sit across from him, and have a calm conversation. That was Sarah's plan. Calmly, without accusations, without resentment, without tears like adults who share a young child and a life together. She pulled 2 plates from the cabinet, a large one with a navy blue rim for Ryan, a smaller one for herself. She carefully plated the pancakes, adding a pat of butter and a spoonful of homemade cherry preserves her mother had canned last summer. Her mom always had a pantry full of them mason jars with labels cut from a checkered notebook reading cherries, summer. When Sarah was pregnant, her mom drove over with a whole tote bag full of these jars, saying, "Vitamins for the baby, sweetie." She barely added any sugar to them. Sarah had laughed back then, saying that 3 spoons of the preserves probably had more sugar than a whole can of soda, but she took the jars anyway, and now she opened one almost every morning. A deep silence filled the kitchen, the kind that only exists between 6 and 8 a.m., when no one in the apartment building has left for work yet. The elevator is still asleep, and outside, the sky is just beginning to lighten over the city skyline. Sarah used to love this time of day before Liam was born because she and Ryan could share breakfast. After his birth, she loved it because Liam usually slept, and she could just be herself, not a mother, not a wife, not an exhausted woman, but simply Sarah, a 32-year-old woman in a faded daisy print robe, hair tied in a messy ponytail, holding a hot mug in her hands. She placed Ryan's coffee mug in front of his usual seat. They used to have a tradition of eating breakfast together, sitting across from one another. Ryan liked to tell funny stories about work, his buddies at the corporate office, or pointless Zoom meetings. Sarah would listen, laugh, and sometimes serve him a second helping. Now, that tradition was gone. Ryan usually ate standing up, staring at his iPhone, or threw out a quick, "I'll grab a bagel in the car." He'd grab his Yeti tumbler and walk out the door. But today, Sarah decided it would be like old times. "At least I'll try," she thought. She adjusted the dish towel hanging on the oven handle. It was new, white, with embroidered sunflowers. Her mom had given it to her when she brought over fresh vegetables from her suburban garden. "You only have gray towels, sweetie," her mom had said. "Take this one to brighten up the kitchen." Sarah hung it up immediately, and the kitchen did seem a bit brighter. But it did nothing to fix what actually mattered, that the apartment felt freezing cold, and it had nothing to do with the thermostat. She thought about this as she stirred sugar into her coffee. She thought about it, and simultaneously tried not to think about it. Both processes were happening inside her at the same time. Before their son was born, she was certain that his arrival would fill everything with warmth. She and Ryan had been trying for a baby for almost 3 years. At first, it just didn't happen. Then came the doctors and the fertility tests. Then there was one time when it didn't work out, a time they never spoke of out loud again. And then she saw the 2 pink lines, which Ryan didn't believe at first. He asked her to take another test, then another. Then he ran down to the CVS on the corner, bought a 5th one, and sat on the floor in the hallway, waiting for her to come out of the bathroom. When she did, he sat right there on the hardwood floor and asked quietly, "Sarah, is it really true?" She nodded. He pressed his forehead against her still flat stomach, where nothing could be heard yet, and started to cry. Ryan, for the record, never cried. He even joked later that pregnancy hormones must be airborne. They went to every single ultrasound together. Ryan would hold her hand, staring at the monitor like someone witnessing a miracle. And all the way to the car, he'd repeat, "Did you see the heartbeat?" "I saw the heartbeat." They spent ages picking out a name. Ryan wanted Anthony, after his grandfather. Sarah liked Liam. She just thought it sounded nice. They bickered about it right up until the delivery, until finally, Liam was born. The name was settled in the hospital room, when Sarah, her hands still shaking from exhaustion, looked down at the wrinkled red little face and said, "This is Liam." Ryan stood next to her in blue hospital scrubs and a ridiculous hairnet, nodding. His eyes were dazed and overwhelmingly happy, like someone who had suddenly been handed the very thing he'd been searching for his whole life. He whispered, "Sarah, I promise you, now the real life begins. A life nobody else has." A new life did begin, but it was nothing like she had imagined. Ryan lasted a week, maybe a little longer. At first, everything was fine. He brought diapers, ran out for formula, took pictures of his sleeping son, and texted them to his mom with the caption, "Your grandson." But then the nights hit. Liam woke up every 2 hours, sometimes more. Sarah got up, fed him, changed him, rocked him. At first, Ryan got up too, then he stopped. She was the one who told him, "Go back to sleep, you have work in the morning." Then he started waking up irritated. He said his brain felt foggy, that he couldn't function at the firm like this. Soon, he moved to the couch in the living room so at least one of us can get some sleep. It sounded logical, except that this logic kept expanding, and Ryan's presence in her and Liam's life shrank. He started coming home late. First by an hour or two, then he'd arrive after their son was already asleep, blaming a heavy workload. Sarah believed him. He really was going through a stressful quarter, something about a major client project and bonuses. She didn't dig into it. Then he started grabbing drinks with his buddies after work. Kevin and Tyler. She'd known them for years, so initially, it put her at ease. But soon, his friends vanished from his stories. All that remained were meetings and errands. Until finally, for the first time, she caught herself having a dark thought while sitting in the dark kitchen at 3 a.m., feeding her son a bottle. In the apartment building across the street, a light was on in an identical kitchen. There was a woman there too, alone, holding a baby. It made her sick to her stomach to think about how many kitchens like that probably existed. Ryan stopped touching her. At first, Sarah thought it was normal. It happens after giving birth, she had read. Her OB/GYN had warned her that it takes time, but time passed, and he pulled further and further away. When she put a hand on his shoulder, he would flinch, as if he'd been burned. It wasn't intentional, it was a reflex, and that made it hurt even more. Once, she told him, "Ryan, I miss you." He replied, "I'm exhausted, Sarah. I'm suffocating in this apartment." That was the first sentence of its kind. Then came others. "I can't work here. I can't relax here. The whole place smells like baby wipes." He didn't yell. He said it calmly, as if stating facts about the weather, and that casualness was more terrifying than any shouting match. And then, Ryan adopted a strange, alien lightness that hadn't been present in their home for a long time. He came home late, but he wasn't tired. He looked more like someone returning from a party. He smelled of fresh cologne. Sarah knew his colognes, cheap or expensive, and this wasn't his usual scent. He smiled at his phone. Once, she walked into the living room and found him sitting on the couch, staring at his screen and chuckling under his breath. The moment he saw her, the smile vanished as if someone had flipped a switch. He placed the phone face down on the armrest. "Oh, you're here," he said, as if she were a visitor in someone else's house. He started taking his phone into the bathroom to text. That was probably the weirdest part. Before, Ryan would text anyone right in front of her, his mom, his buddies, his coworkers. Now, his phone would buzz in his pocket. He'd look at the screen, say, "Hold on," stand up, and walk to the bathroom. He'd turn on the sink. He'd return 10 minutes later, calm, slightly distant, and wouldn't open his phone again for the rest of the night. Sarah saw all of this. She wasn't stupid. But every time she told herself, "Wait, you just had a baby. Hormones are crazy right now, don't overthink it. It takes men longer to adjust to fatherhood. Give him time." Time passed, and the adjustment never came. So today, she had decided to lay it all out. No more putting it off. They were going to talk no drama, no tears, no baseless suspicions like adults. They would sit across from each other like the old days, and she would ask, "What is going on with you, Ryan? What is happening between us? Where do you go in the evenings? Why don't you hold your son? Why do you look at me like I'm a stranger from down the hall?" She finished the last pancake, slid it onto the plate, and wiped her hands on the sunflower towel. A faint sound came from the hallway. Ryan stepped out of the bathroom. She heard the rustle of hangers in the closet. He was picking out a dress shirt. Sarah checked the clock on the microwave. 7:45 a.m. She had about 20 minutes before he actually had to rush out the door. And that's when she saw the tablet. It was lying on the edge of the dining table near the wall, an area Ryan treated as a makeshift home office. Sometimes he sat there at night with spreadsheets. The tablet was lying face up, its screen dark, but a tiny red icon was blinking in the corner. The battery was almost dead. Sarah looked at it like it was an ordinary object and started to walk toward the fridge. But then she stopped. Ryan always got annoyed when his devices died around other people, as he put it. "You saw the red light. Why couldn't you just plug it in?" That was his usual complaint. Sarah typically responded, "How am I supposed to know if you're using it or not?" They had even fought about it a few times, the petty squabbles of exhausted people fighting over nonsense to hide something much bigger. So now, simply to avoid an evening argument, she reached out. The charger was right there, plugged into the outlet near the baseboard. Sarah bent down, grabbed the cable, and picked up the tablet. The back of it was warm, as if someone had just been using it. She pushed the connector in. The tablet chimed softly. The screen lit up. It was locked, just a black square with a numeric keypad in the center and the time at the top. But right at the very top, in the notification banner under the clock, was a small line of text. At first, Sarah didn't look closely. She was already turning back to the stove when her peripheral vision caught the letters and the sender's name. L. Doc. Just that. No first name. Just an initial and an abbreviation. As if this person weren't a human being, but a digital folder. The message itself was collapsed. The text wasn't showing, just a notification that something had arrived. But for some reason, Sarah froze. For some reason, that sender name pricked her instantly, before she even processed why. L could mean anything. Linda, Leon, Lauren, Lucy. Doc could mean work documents, or it could mean doctor. Ryan had actually mentioned recently that he needed to see a chiropractor for his back. She herself had told him, "Just go, don't put it off." It could have been that doctor, but her hand turned ice cold. Not from fear yet, but from that faint, nearly invisible intuition that women know so well, and yet trust so rarely. She wanted to put the tablet down. She really did. A thought even crossed her mind. Don't touch it. If something's there, it'll come to light on its own. Don't be the crazy wife who snoops through phones. But at that exact second, another recent memory surfaced. From a week ago, they were sitting in the kitchen. Ryan was trying to fix some app on his tablet, swearing under his breath. Then he said, "I'm setting a lucky passcode." Laughing, he typed in 4 digits their son's birth date. "If this doesn't save me, nothing will." Sarah had felt a surge of joy then. She felt like he was finally acknowledging that he had a child. Now, she remembered those numbers. Month. Day 4 digits she knew by heart, because she wrote them on hospital discharge papers, the birth certificate, every pediatrician intake form. She typed them in. The tablet clicked quietly and unlocked. At first, she didn't understand. The screen didn't open to the homepage, but straight into a messaging app. Ryan had clearly been texting someone that morning and hadn't closed the app. It was a massive white chat screen with the contact name at the very top. That same L. Doc. No profile picture, no status. Just a name. Like a file in an accounting cabinet. The messages flowed one after another, long and short. Sarah didn't read the last one first. Her eyes snagged on the middle of the screen. There was a larger block of text there. "I'm sick of being second. You weren't even happy after the baby was born anyway. You said yourself that the kid split your life in half. If you want to be with me, stop taking pity on her." Sarah read it and initially failed to comprehend what she was looking at. The words seemed to be written in a foreign language. She read it again. Then again. The ticking of the wall clock suddenly grew deafening in her ears. Somewhere far away, through the wall in the nursery, Liam sighed softly. He was probably rolling over in his sleep. Sarah automatically tuned her hearing to that sound, because hearing it was far more familiar to her than what she was holding in her hands. Her son fell back into a rhythmic breathing pattern, and Sarah stood in her kitchen, wearing a daisy print robe, a hot cast-iron skillet at her back, holding a stolen tablet on which some woman was telling her husband, "I'm sick of being second." So, Laura or Lauren, or whatever her name was, wasn't an assistant, a doctor, or a project manager. She was Ryan's woman, a mistress he had evidently found after she had given birth to his son, after he stood in blue scrubs in the delivery room whispering about a new life, after he cried on the hardwood floor pressing his forehead to her stomach. After all that, he found someone else, and that someone was texting him that she was tired of being second. The pancakes were getting cold on the plate. Sarah slowly lowered her eyes to the last message, the one that had flashed on the lock screen a minute ago. It was shorter, drier, totally different from the first one, as if written by someone else entirely. Calm, businesslike, accustomed to paperwork. The results are ready. You can pick them up today. Yes, DNA. An agreement is essential. And right below it was an attachment, a photo of a document. Sarah tapped the file. A medical report opened up on the screen. A fertility clinic letterhead, a stamp, Ryan's full name, columns of test results. And at the bottom, a highlighted sentence where her gaze hit a brick wall. Severe impairment of reproductive function. Natural conception, practically impossible. She read that line 3 times. 4 times. 5. And then, she slowly lifted her head and looked at the nursery door. It was cracked open about the width of a hand. Sarah always left it like that at night so she could listen in. Through the gap, she could see the edge of the white crib with the little carved bears. Behind that edge, sleeping on his side with his hand under his cheek, lay 4-month-old Liam, her son, her and Ryan's son, his dark eyelashes. Ryan's eyelashes long, slightly curled at the ends. She had noticed them for the first time in the hospital and told her mother-in-law, he's his father in miniature. The dimple in his chin was his, too. Whenever Liam smiled in his sleep, the dimple deepened, making the resemblance uncanny. And right now, Sarah was staring at a photograph of a medical report claiming that, for Ryan, such a son had no biological right to exist. Something inside her clicked. It didn't break. It didn't shatter into a million pieces. It just clicked, like a heavy lever in an old piece of machinery shifting into a new gear. If she were someone else, on a different morning, in a different state of mind, maybe she would have collapsed onto the floor and started sobbing. Maybe she would have doubted herself, replaying 1,000 frantic questions in her head. What if? What if he's right? What if I blacked out and don't remember? But Sarah had only gotten pregnant once in her entire life, and she knew with absolute, unshakable certainty who the father was. She looked at those eyelashes, that dimple, that tiny fist tucked under the cheek. That's why she didn't believe the report. She believed something else entirely. Ryan and this Lauren woman were setting up a dirty game. Before any real tests were done, before doctors confirmed anything, before the courts got involved, they wanted to shove a piece of paper in Sarah's face, claiming the baby wasn't his. They wanted to manipulate her with fear, so she would sign she didn't know exactly what yet, but her gut screamed that it wouldn't be anything good. Why else the rush? Why an agreement is essential before a DNA test? Strangely, her hands stopped shaking. In fact, they became terrifyingly steady. She reached for her own iPhone lying on the counter next to the sunflower towel. Quickly, one by one, she photographed the entire conversation. First, the message about being second. Then the one about the kid splitting his life in half. Then the text about DNA and the agreement. Then the medical report itself, zooming in on the stamp so it was perfectly legible. She didn't take a single breath while snapping the photos. When she finished, she exhaled, checked her camera roll to ensure they saved, and backed out of the messaging app. Carefully, she pressed the lock button on the tablet. The screen went black. Sarah placed it exactly where she had found it, face up on the edge of the table by the wall. She didn't unplug the charger, let everything look exactly as if she had simply plugged it in as usual, without opening anything, reading anything, or knowing anything. She stepped back to the stove. A small flame was still burning under the skillet. She had forgotten to turn it off. Sarah twisted the knob. The flame vanished, and total silence returned to the kitchen. Into that silence, she heard footsteps in the hallway. Ryan was walking toward the kitchen, his pace slow. The casual morning stride of a man who has everything under control. He smelled of fresh cologne, that same alien scent. The collar of his dress shirt was perfectly ironed, his hair still slightly damp from the shower. He looked neat, well-groomed, rested. Way too rested for a man who had spent the last week complaining that the apartment was suffocating him. "Oh, you're up?" he said, stopping in the doorway. His gaze slid over the table, the coffee mugs, the pancakes, and landed on the tablet by the wall. For a fraction of a second, a sharp, barely noticeable crease appeared between his eyebrows. If Sarah hadn't known what she knew now, she never would have caught it. But she did. "Did you plug it in?" he asked. "Yeah, I plugged it in," Sarah replied. Her voice sounded perfectly level. Even she was surprised. "Sit down, it's getting cold." He sat in his usual spot across from her, unfolded a napkin, picked up his fork, and looked at her across the table. In that look was everything she had memorized over the last few months. A calm, slightly detached attention, almost polite, the look of someone whose mind is a million miles away while eating someone else's pancakes. Sarah poured him coffee, then sat down across from him, resting her hands on the table. "Are you going to be home tonight?" she asked. Ryan paused, took a sip from his mug, and looked somewhere past her shoulder. "I don't know," he replied. "I've got an errand to run." And in that second, Sarah realized he wasn't the only one who was going to be running errands today. Ryan ate his pancakes in a hurry. He used to linger at the table. He used to tell stories. He used to ask for seconds and say, "Sarah, you're an amazing cook." Today he ate 3, pushed his plate away, wiped his mouth, and stood up. He finished his coffee standing by the sink. Checking his Apple Watch, he threw out a casual, "All right, I gotta run." He walked over to the chair where his suit jacket was hanging. Putting it on by the hallway door, he turned back, his eyes once again sliding over the table to the tablet. Sarah saw it out of the corner of her eye as she began clearing the plates. She purposefully didn't turn around. She poured herself more coffee, acting as if nothing in the world mattered more than that mug. "Listen, I've got to drop by my mom's later," he said. "I might be late." "Got it," Sarah replied. He stood in the doorway for another second, as if he wanted to add something, but didn't. He closed the door behind him, a soft, casual click, the way you close a door 100 times a week. Sarah listened to the deadbolt, the sound of the elevator being called, the elevator descending, and only then did she set her mug down on the table. Very carefully, because her hands had suddenly stopped being steady. In the nursery, Liam stirred. A quiet, sleepy whimper. It wasn't a cry yet, just the warm-up to a cry. Sarah stood, wiped her hands on the sunflower towel, and went to her son. Liam was lying on his back, punching the air with his little fists, the way babies do when they want to be picked up. He saw his mother, smiled a gummy smile, and the dimple in his chin deepened. Sarah leaned over, scooped him up, and held him against her shoulder. He was warm, already getting a little heavy. He smelled of milk, and that specific, intoxicating baby scent that can't be mistaken for anything else. She stood there for a full minute with her eyes closed, inhaling that scent as deeply as she could. "Let's get you fed, my sweet boy," she whispered. The day rolled on its usual tracks. Sarah moved around the apartment as she always did. She fed Liam, changed his diapers, washed bottles, put them in the sterilizer, folded baby clothes, and hung laundry on the drying rack by the window. Everything was exactly the same as yesterday, the day before, and last week. The only difference was that inside her head, like a broken record, 2 lines looped endlessly. DNA, an agreement is essential and I'm sick of being second. She tried to swat them away, but she couldn't. They came back when she was mixing baby cereal. They came back when she was changing a diaper. They came back when she watched her son sleeping in her arms, his dark eyelashes fluttering in his dreams. She performed every movement as if underwater slowly, fighting against the current. The coffee in her own mug went cold. She only remembered it when she took a sip and grimaced. She had left a saucepan of water boiling on the stove. She forgot to turn off the burner. Thank God the water hadn't completely evaporated. There was still an inch left. Sarah turned off the gas and pressed her forehead against the cool cabinet door. She stood like that for a dozen seconds. It helped a little. The washing machine in the bathroom entered its spin cycle and howled like a jet engine. Sarah jumped out of her skin, then laughed at herself. Good Lord, getting spooked by a Maytag. Around noon, she dressed Liam and carried him out to the enclosed sunroom. The windows could be opened, and Sarah always cracked them to let in some fresh air. Down in the condo courtyard, her third-floor neighbor was taking a walk. Mrs. Higgins with her little white Maltese. Mrs. Higgins saw Sarah in the window and waved. Sarah waved back. Liam breathed quietly against her shoulder, warm, content, completely unaware that his own father had spent the morning plotting to make him a fatherless child. And right then, for the first time since that morning, Sarah felt something inside her begin to violently tremble. Not on the outside, but deep within, like a live electrical wire. It looked calm on the surface, but touch it, and it would electrocute you. She laid Liam down in his crib, turned on the mobile with the little bears and the soft lullaby, and watched him get lost in the music. Sarah slipped silently out of the nursery. She closed the door, walked to the kitchen, sat down at the table, picked up her iPhone, and opened her photo gallery. Everything was there. The document hadn't vanished. The text messages hadn't vanished. She hadn't lost her mind, and she hadn't imagined it. She quickly scrolled to Nicole in her contacts. They had been friends for 12 years, since their sophomore year of college. Nicole had become a lawyer, specifically a family law attorney. Sarah still remembered joking with her back in the day. Family law? Sure. Other people's divorces are the best reality TV. Nicole had replied, "We'll see how funny you think it is when you need me." Sarah wasn't laughing now. She hit the call button. Nicole picked up on the third ring. "Hey babe, I'll call you back in 15. Got a client in the conference room. Emergency or no?" Sarah normally would have said, "No, take your time," even if the house was on fire. But this time, she heard her own voice come out like steel. "Emergency." There was a 1-second pause on the other end. "Give me 7 minutes." She called back exactly 7 minutes later. Her voice was entirely different now. Focused, professional, ready for war. "Talk to me." And Sarah laid it out in chronological order. How Ryan had changed after the baby. The birthday passcode. L. Doc. The text saying I'm sick of being second. The text about the kid splitting his life in half. The message about DNA and an agreement. The fake fertility report. Severe impairment of reproductive function. Liam's eyelashes and dimpled chin. And how Ryan had glanced at the tablet that morning, and how that one fleeting look had given him away. Nicole listened in absolute silence. She only interrupted once. "Did you get pictures?" "Yes. On my phone." "Perfect." When Sarah finished, the line went dead silent for a full minute. Then, Nicole began speaking slowly, calmly, the way a hostage negotiator speaks to someone standing on the ledge of a building. "Sarah, listen to me very carefully. I am going to tell you a few things, and I need you to burn them into your brain as if I'm writing them on a whiteboard. You with me?" "I'm listening." Number 1. A medical certificate claiming infertility, even if it were 100% genuine, does not legally nullify paternity. Do you understand? Infertility is a medical probability. Paternity is a legal fact. Because you are married, he is the presumed father under state law. That legal fact can only be overturned by a court-ordered DNA test. No piece of paper from a clinic, no lab result saying his swimmers are dead, has any legal standing to prove Liam isn't his. That is the first and most important thing. I understand. Number 2, if he shoves some document in your face and tries to drag you into signing a postnuptial or separation agreement before any court-ordered DNA test, he needs you to panic before you find out the truth. It is crucial you understand this. A man who wants the truth demands a legal DNA test. A man who wants to blindside and scam you drags you to a mediator to sign away your rights. Got it? Got it. Number 3, and I need you to listen to me closer than you ever have in your life. You sign nothing. Not a single piece of paper. No, let's handle this quietly. No, let's not involve the parents. No, it's for the baby's sake. Not a single signature, Sarah. Even if he cries. Even if he brings you roses. Even if he swears he loves you. You do not sign your name to anything without me sitting in the room. Are we clear? Crystal clear. Number 4. Do not run to a clinic. Do not order a 23andMe or a private DNA test just to satisfy your own anxiety. If we need to do it, we will do it entirely by the book, through the family court during the divorce proceedings. For now, you confirm nothing. You deny nothing. You just live your life and feed your son. Okay. And number 5, Sarah. Do not let him know you saw anything. Do not blow up. Do not smash the tablet against the wall. Do not text this Lauren bitch. Do not call her. I am dead serious. If he didn't realize you read it, that is your biggest weapon. Let him think you are still completely in the dark. He'll act out of a false sense of security. And a comfortable liar always leaves more digital footprints than a scared one. Are you with me? I'm with you. Sarah sat at the kitchen table. Her shoulder ached from pressing the phone to her ear, while her free hand mechanically gathered the crumbs from the morning's pancakes into a tiny pile on the tablecloth. She listened to Nicole, and for the first time that day, she didn't feel terror. She felt a rising, glacial calm. Not because everything was okay, but because the nightmare now had a name, a battle plan, and an absolute shark of an attorney steering the ship. Text me the photos and screenshots right now, Nicole ordered. Sending them now. One more thing. If he comes home tonight and initiates this conversation, and he probably will, considering he mentioned an errand, listen to him carefully. Memorize his phrasing. Better yet, turn on the voice memos app on your iPhone and slip it in your robe pocket. You are a party to the conversation. You're in your own home. It's legal in our state to record with one-party consent. I'll explain the legalese later, but do it. Just keep the phone in your pocket. Okay. You did flawless work today, Sarah. You hear me? I hear you. Sarah thanked her, hung up, and placed the phone face down. She sat for a minute, then another. She stood up, carried her cold coffee mug to the sink, and turned on the faucet. The water rushed out with a soft hiss. With that sound, it somehow became easier to breathe. The day marched on, except now the broken record in her head was replaced by a short checklist. Sign nothing. Show nothing. Keep the phone in the pocket. It was a very simple list. That simplicity slowly lifted the crushing weight off her chest. She fed Liam again, put him down for a nap, and took him for a short stroll around the condo courtyard. Mrs. Higgins and her dog were already back inside. 2 elderly women sat on a bench, loudly complaining about how much the price of organic onions had skyrocketed at Whole Foods this year. Sarah walked past them, nodded, and they nodded back. The world around her was spinning exactly as it had that morning. It was a bizarre sensation. Your entire house is burning to the ground inside your chest, and outside, people are complaining about produce prices. Back at the apartment, she cleaned up and folded the laundry. She heated up a simple bowl of chicken noodle soup for herself. She ate it standing by the stove because her legs refused to sit. She kept glancing at her Apple Watch. Ryan had promised to be home late. That word hung over her all day like a dark, heavy storm cloud. Around 7 p.m., her mom called. Sarah let it go to voicemail. No, she would talk to her mom later. She would tell her everything, but not today. Her mom would start crying, panicking, and immediately pack a suitcase to drive over. Sarah needed ice-cold focus right now, not to be a shoulder to cry on. At 8:30 p.m., Liam finally went down for his heavy night's sleep. He'd be out for at least 3 hours, she hoped. Sarah sat in the living room armchair, pulled a throw blanket over her legs, and waited. She turned on the TV but muted the volume, just to have some flickering light and movement in the room. On the screen, a late-night talk show host was soundlessly laughing with a celebrity guest. At 10 minutes to 10, the deadbolt clicked. Ryan walked into the entryway, and Sarah instantly knew the vibe had shifted. He looked different than he had that morning. This morning, he was composed and slick. Now, he radiated a tense, deliberate calm, the exact demeanor of a man carrying a loaded gun in his pocket. Hey, he said. Hey, the baby's asleep. He's asleep. Cellophane rustled in the hallway. Sarah leaned forward slightly and saw Ryan walk into the living room holding a bouquet of flowers. A large bouquet. White lisianthus and greenery wrapped in florist paper with a ribbon. Ryan hadn't bought her flowers in 8, maybe 9 months. Not since Mother's Day, for sure. He approached and extended the bouquet toward her. Sarah took it. The flowers smelled of refrigeration and fresh cuts, definitely straight from a high-end florist. The chill hadn't even evaporated off the petals yet. She held them against her chest and looked at her husband. Ryan met her eyes for a fraction of a second, then quickly looked away. He walked past her toward the nursery. He pushed the door open an inch, stood there for a moment, and peered inside. Liam let out a loud, sleepy sigh right on cue. Ryan didn't step into the room, didn't lean over the crib, didn't adjust the blanket. He just stared for 5 seconds, then gently closed the door and returned to the living room. "Sit down, Sarah," he said softly. "We need to talk." He sat on the sofa opposite her armchair. He placed a dark leather briefcase on his lap. It had surprisingly pristine, unscuffed corners. Sarah had never seen it before. He unzipped it. A stack of paperwork slid halfway out, and in that exact second, without taking her eyes off the briefcase, Sarah slipped her free hand into the pocket of her daisy print robe. Her iPhone, warm from her body heat, was waiting. Her thumb found the Voice Memos app and hit the red record button. Ryan opened the flap of the briefcase. He fumbled slightly. He pulled a document out, and another sheet almost slipped off his knee. He caught it, straightened the stack of papers, and pressed his hand flat against them, as if terrified the truth would blow away before he could control the narrative. Sarah watched in silence. The bouquet rested on her lap over the blanket. She didn't set it down. She simply didn't have the energy to move it. The flowers smelled like the cold air of a florist's cooler. For some reason, the scent stung the back of her throat. "Sarah," Ryan started. Please don't get upset. I'm begging you. Just hear me out." "I'm listening," Sarah replied. He dragged a hand down his face, exhaled heavily, and paused the exact dramatic pause of a man who has rehearsed a monologue in his car but suddenly forgets his opening line. "I know how this is going to sound," he continued. "And I know you just gave birth a few months ago. It's hard. Your hormones are all over the place. I get all of that. Which is why I need you to listen to me calmly, like a rational person." Sarah said nothing. She simply tightened her fingers around a flower stem through the cellophane wrapper. A tiny thorn or sharp leaf bit into her skin, and she grounded herself in that small, sharp pain. Ryan pulled the top sheet of paper from the stack and placed it on the coffee table between them, turned so she could read it. It was the same report. Sarah instantly recognized the clinic logo, the stamp, and the columns. Except now, the document looked crisp and rigid, as if it had been printed on heavy-duty laser paper that morning. "I went to a specialist," he said. "I've been meaning to go for a while, but I kept putting it off. You know how it is, and, long story short, they found some serious abnormalities. It's all written right here. Read it if you want. I'm not going to treat you like an idiot, Sarah. I'm just going to lay out the facts. According to these results, conceiving a child naturally is practically impossible for me." He fell silent, watching her intently, bracing for her reaction. Sarah slowly lowered her eyes to the paper. She stared at the familiar line. "Severe impairment of reproductive function. Natural conception practically impossible." She read it again, pretending it was the very first time, then raised her eyes. "And what does that mean?" she asked. Her voice was flat, slightly raspy. "What do you mean? What does that mean?" Ryan leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Sarah, do you realize what this implies? Say it yourself." He dragged his hand down his face again, licking his lips. "It means I can't be certain Liam is my son. I'm not saying I'm accusing you. Look, I'm not accusing you. Maybe something happened. Maybe it didn't. I'm not digging into it. Maybe you didn't even know yourself. But facts are facts. I have these lab results. And with these results, a baby is one massive question mark." Sarah looked at him and didn't see her husband. She saw a man reciting a script he'd memorized in the bathroom mirror. She saw it because his pauses were too perfectly timed. She saw it because he said, "I'm not accusing you," with the exact inflection a judge uses when handing down a life sentence. She saw it because his hand was still firmly pinning down the briefcase, which clearly contained Act 2 of his performance. "Ryan," she said slowly, "if you have doubts, let's get a DNA test." Ryan's face shifted for a fraction of a second. It was incredibly brief, but Sarah caught it. A shadow of panic flickered under his skin. Then, he forced the mask back into place. "Listen," he said, holding up a hand. "Listen, I asked you to stay calm. And you're already throwing around words like DNA and threatening a blowout." "I didn't say blowout. I said DNA. Sarah, use your head. If we start dragging this through medical examiners and courts, You know how this system works. It goes through family court. Court means public records. It means dragging our dirty laundry out for everyone to see. Your parents will find out, my parents will find out, the guys at my firm will know, your coworkers will know when you go off maternity leave. Do you really want the whole city gossiping about who you knocked boots with to get pregnant? I got pregnant with you. This piece of paper didn't give birth to my child. Her voice rose slightly. He went quiet for a moment, leaned back against the sofa cushions, stared at the ceiling, then looked back at her. Sarah, I don't want to destroy you. That's not why I'm here. I'm here to offer you a clean way out, like adults. No public shame. So that you and I can quietly move on with our lives. He pulled a second document from the briefcase and placed it on top of the medical report. It was a separation agreement. Sarah could see the densely typed paragraphs, the numbered sections, the blank lines for signatures at the very bottom. Look, he said smoothly. Everything here is extremely fair. I keep the condo, since I'm the one who paid the down payment. You know that. I keep my car. It's registered in my name anyway. But I thought about you. I know you're in a tough spot right now. I've secured a lump sum for you here. Look, it's written right there enough for you to rent a nice apartment for the first few months, get back on your feet. And as for child support, there's a separate clause for that. We'll revisit that after the biological paternity is established. If he's mine, I pay. If not, well, you understand. Sarah stared at the agreement, but for some reason, the letters blurred. Instead, she fixated on a vein pulsing on Ryan's neck. It was throbbing fast, rhythmically, like a metronome. Tick, tick, tick. He was nervous. Terrified, actually. The main thing is not to panic, he added quickly. It's just a piece of paper. A mediator looks it over, we sign it, and it's a done deal. Nobody ever finds out. No courts, no mudslinging. Quiet, like adults. He swallowed hard, cutting off his own sentence, blinked, and corrected himself. We won't even need to involve the blood-sucking lawyers if you just agree to this calmly. We can handle it, just the two of us. Lauren. He almost said Lauren. Sarah heard the slip, but didn't show it. She just squeezed the thorny stem under the cellophane a little tighter. And what if I don't sign it? She asked. Then it's war in family court, Sarah. Subpoenas, depositions. Your mom and my mom will find out. Everybody will know. Is that really what you want? With a baby on your hip, no job right now, and nowhere to live? Do you really want to drag yourself through that mud? Sarah cut him off. Why are you telling me all this? What's with the speeches? The parents? The jobs? The condo? Are you trying to convince me to sign? Or are you trying to blackmail me into it? He sat in silence, staring at her for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice lost its polished, rehearsed tone. It was quieter, sharper. I am trying to help you. In that case, let's do the DNA test. A standard, legal DNA test before we sign anything with any mediator. I don't understand why you're clinging so hard to this paperwork and dodging a simple cheek swab. Ryan stood up, paced over to the window, turned around, and sat back down. Fine, he finally snapped. Listen, you don't have to decide tonight. Don't sign it today. Think about it. I'm in no rush. But I am asking you one thing. Do not drag anyone else into this. No lawyer friends, no girlfriends, no mommy. This is our private business. Deal? Sarah slowly set the bouquet down on the armrest. The eustomas slid sideways inside their plastic wrap. The ribbon skewed. I am not signing anything without an attorney, she said, her voice ice cold. Nothing. Ryan slammed the briefcase shut with a violent crack. Sarah flinched. For the first time all evening, the smooth, rehearsed facade melted off his face. Ugly red blotches erupted across his cheekbones. You want to go to war, he spat? I'm not going to war, Sarah replied evenly. I've just decided I'm not signing my life away over a forged piece of paper your mistress printed out for you. The silence that slammed into the living room was so absolute that Sarah could hear the kitchen faucet dripping down the hall. Ryan turned paper white. It lasted only a fraction of a second, as quick as a camera flash. But Sarah saw it clearly. The vein in his neck twitched violently. His bottom lip froze, and in his eyes, she saw the exact terror of a man realizing the floor has just vanished beneath his feet. A second later, he slapped on a mask of outraged disbelief. But it was too late. "What the hell are you talking about?" he whispered loudly. "What mistress? Are you listening to yourself?" "I hear myself perfectly. You've got some severe postpartum psychosis going on, Sarah. You need a psychiatrist." "Great. And you go to the mediator by yourself." "Because I am not stepping foot in that office without my lawyer." He shot up from the couch, grabbing the briefcase. He didn't even glance at the bouquet tossed aside on the chair. He stormed toward the hallway. A second later, she heard a familiar sound. He stepped into the bathroom and locked the door behind him. He turned on the sink faucet on full blast. A few moments later, cutting through the roar of the running water, she heard his muffled, frantic, hushed voice. She couldn't make out every individual word, but Sarah knew exactly who was on the other end of the line. She stood up from the armchair. Slowly, she walked toward the bathroom door. She stopped 3 feet away. No closer. She strained her ears. "I don't know how. I didn't say anything. She just brought it up herself." "DNA? We can't. Do you hear me? We can't. If we do that, the whole thing blows up. We have to move faster. I'll force her to sign at the mediators tomorrow." Sarah backed away, stepping soundlessly back to the living room. She sat in the armchair, pulled the blanket over her legs, and fished her iPhone out of her pocket. The voice memos app was still running. A red dot pulsed steadily on the screen. She hit stop, named the file, and slid the phone back into her pocket. The next morning, Ryan left the apartment early, skipping breakfast, without saying a single word. Only when he was standing in the open doorway did he toss over his shoulder, "I'll text you the address of the mediator's office later," and he walked out. The moment the deadbolt clicked, Sarah called Nicole. 2 hours later, they were sitting together at Nicole's kitchen island. Nicole was wearing a sharp black blazer, her legal notepad open, pushing her thin-rimmed glasses up her nose, the same glasses Sarah had loved, teasing her about back in college. Spread out in front of Nicole were the printed photos of Ryan's documents. Sarah had stayed up taking high-res shots of the paperwork while Ryan slept on the couch and printed them at a FedEx store that morning. Nicole studied them in absolute silence for 10 solid minutes. Finally, she took off her glasses and pinched the bridge of her nose. "All right, Sarah, listen to me. First off, the condo was purchased after you were married. A huge chunk of the down payment came from the inheritance your grandmother left you. We can easily trace that back through bank wire transfers. That's point number 1. Point number 2. Liam was born during the marriage. By state law, Ryan is the presumed legal father, and he stays the legal father until a family court judge bangs a gavel and says otherwise. No piece of paper from a strip mall clinic changes that. Understand?" "I understand." Secondly, this report itself is incredibly sketchy. Look at this registration number, it doesn't format right. The letterhead is outdated. Medical facilities in the state updated these privacy footers like 3 years ago. Plus, the doctor's signature has a stamp but no DEA or state medical license number beneath it, and the initials are completely blurred. I'm going to send an official subpoena request to this clinic today. If they reply saying they have no record of issuing this to Ryan, we are stepping into an entirely different ballpark. That's felony forgery of medical records. Do you think this Lauren woman faked it herself? Sarah asked. I don't care who pressed print, Nicole said grimly. I'll find out, and we'll figure out how to nuke them with it when the clinic replies. Nicole closed her leather portfolio. Rule number 3, the most important one. You do not run to any clinics. You don't order a private cheek swab kit off the internet. You will do a court-ordered, legally admissible DNA test during the divorce and paternity proceedings, and nowhere else. Otherwise, his lawyers will get the private results thrown out on chain of custody grounds. Are you listening? I'm listening. And you sign absolutely nothing at this mediator's office. When he texts the address, you send it to me. I'm going with you. Sarah nodded. Ryan texted the following evening. His tone over the phone was artificially soft, almost tender, the exact voice he used when he desperately needed a favor. Sarah, I booked us for 10 a.m. the day after tomorrow. We'll just sit down. We'll look over the terms. No signing if you aren't comfortable. Just a clean, formal conversation with a neutral third party. Fine, Sarah said. I'll be there. And she hung up. On the appointed day, Sarah drove to the law office with Nicole. They arrived 20 minutes early on purpose, just to scout the area. It was a standard corporate mid-rise building downtown. The mediator's office was on the second floor. Sarah and Nicole took the stairs instead of the elevator at Nicole's insistence. Standing in the hallway outside the glass doors of the firm was Ryan, and standing next to him was a young woman, maybe 30 or 32, wearing a beige trench coat buttoned to the collar, sensible pumps, and a designer crossbody bag. She was holding a phone, pretending to be deeply engrossed in the screen. But Sarah caught it instantly. Every 2 or 3 seconds, the woman's eyes darted nervously toward Ryan, checking his reaction. Ryan stood slightly turned away from her. They weren't speaking, but they were tethered by that hyper-anxious, invisible wire that connects two people desperately trying to act like they don't know each other in public. Ryan saw Sarah and took a step forward. A strained, tight smile stretched across his face. "Hey, I'm so glad you came. We'll head in right now. Everything is going to be fine." Then, he finally noticed Nicole walking a half step behind her. The smile vanished from his face in a nanosecond. "This is my attorney," Sarah announced loudly. Ryan opened his mouth, closed it, and shot a brief, terrified look at the woman in the beige trench coat. The woman buried her face closer to her iPhone screen. Sarah walked straight up to her. The woman in the trench coat looked up. In that moment, her face was an open book. "Lauren, right?" Sarah asked quietly. The woman turned white. Without saying a word, she shot a look of sheer desperation at Ryan, begging for a lifeline. Ryan hastily closed the distance between them. This is a colleague from the accounting department," Ryan stammered. "I asked her to come along in case we needed some advice on the financial disclosures for the asset division." Nicole smoothly unclasped her black leather briefcase. She pulled out a stack of 8x10 glossy printer paper. They were blown up, crystal-clear screenshots of the tablet conversation. With absolute surgical precision, she spread them out in a neat row across the hallway radiator cover, right under Ryan and Lauren's noses. "Fantastic," Nicole declared. Her voice was so authoritative and icy that Ryan instinctively took a half step back. "In that case, perhaps the accounting colleague could explain to my client why she is providing written legal advice to her lover to sign a separation agreement before conducting a court-mandated DNA test. Is that a new premium service your firm is offering?" Lauren stared down at the printed screenshots. At her own words, "I'm sick of being second. An agreement is essential." Her face flushed an ugly, mottled purple. She whipped around to face Ryan. "You told me she didn't know anything," Lauren shrieked. "You said she was going to sign it. You said she was too scared of the public embarrassment. You were the one who wanted to leave her, Ryan. You were the one crying to me every night that the kid ruined your life. Don't act like I forced you into this." Her voice climbed an octave higher. The last few sentences echoed down the marble hallway. The glass doors to the law office cracked open. A young paralegal holding a stack of manila folders poked her head out, took one look at the screaming match, and immediately vanished back inside. A minute later, the mediator herself, a stern woman in her 50s wearing a tailored navy suit, marched out into the hall. She took in the scene with one sweeping glance. A beat, red Ryan, a sobbing Lauren, evidence photos arrayed on the radiator, an attorney holding a briefcase, and Sarah leaning calmly against the wall. "We will not be drafting or executing any agreements today," the mediator announced sharply. "I do not facilitate legal settlements under conditions of coercion, fraud, or highly volatile domestic disputes outside my office doors. Please leave the premises immediately." Ryan tried to stammer out an excuse, but the mediator simply raised a hand like a traffic cop and shut the heavy glass door in his face. The lock clicked loudly. Lauren, no longer looking at anyone, spun on her heel and sprinted toward the stairwell. The frantic clatter of her pumps echoed down to the lobby and disappeared. Ryan caught up to Sarah on the sidewalk outside the building. He grabbed the sleeve of her coat. "Sarah! Sarah! Listen to me! It was all her! It was her idea. She pushed me into it. You don't understand, after Liam was born, I felt completely lost. I was depressed. She manipulated me. She totally twisted my mind." Sarah pulled her arm free with a calm, deliberate motion. "Ryan," she said, her voice freezing the air between them, "you weren't lost. You had everything perfectly under control when you downloaded a secure messaging app to cheat on me. You were perfectly in control when you fabricated a fake medical document. When you drafted a fraudulent financial settlement and booked a mediator, You weren't looking for the truth. You were trying to escape before the truth caught up with you. She turned her back on him and walked toward the SUV where Nicole was waiting. Behind her, Ryan kept yelling something, trying to justify himself, but Sarah was no longer listening. The petition for divorce was filed in family court a week later. Nicole had documented everything with lethal precision. The division of assets, primary physical and legal custody to the mother, a motion for temporary child support, and spousal support. When Ryan received the summons in the mail, he instantly panicked and called his mother. His mother, Christine, immediately called Sarah, sobbing hysterically through the phone that you kids are throwing it all away and you have to think about my grandson. Sarah listened to her cry without offering a single word of defense. When Christine paused for a breath, Sarah said calmly, "Christine, ask your son about the forged fertility clinic report. Ask him about Lauren. Then, and only then, we can talk." Her mother-in-law went dead silent. She never called again. Ryan himself behaved exactly as Nicole had predicted. First, he threatened to contest paternity all the way to the state Supreme Court. Then he dragged his feet during the discovery phase, conveniently forgetting to submit W-2s, asking his lawyer for extensions, citing medical anxiety. Then, abruptly, he flipped the script and started playing the wounded victim. He sent Sarah massive, multi-paragraph text messages claiming he was a human being with feelings, that no one understood his pain, and that Sarah was destroying their family over petty, vindictive delusions. Sarah never replied. She simply screenshotted every single text and forwarded them to Nicole, who happily archived them in a digital folder. "We call this giving them enough rope," Nicole would say cheerfully. In family court, every word he types is a nail in his coffin. The court-mandated DNA test was scheduled a month and a half later. Sarah brought Liam to the designated lab facility on the exact date and time. Ryan showed up too. He looked miserable. He had let himself go. He was wearing a wrinkled Henley shirt Sarah had never seen before. He didn't even say hello. The buccal swab on the inside of Liam's cheek took exactly 10 seconds. Liam didn't cry at all. He just stared in wide-eyed wonder at the technician holding the Q-tip, and then flashed a giant gummy smile. Seeing that toothless smile, Ryan flinched violently and turned his face to the blank wall. The 3 weeks waiting for the results felt to Sarah like one endless, gray morning. She fed her son, pushed the stroller around the neighborhood block, and cooked giant batches of soup to keep her own strength up. She fell asleep with Liam in her bed. Her mom drove down and stayed with her for a week. She scrubbed the baseboards, folded burp cloths, and didn't ask a single probing question. Only once, late at night over cups of chamomile tea, did her mom stroke Sarah's hair like she was a little girl again and whisper, "You are so unbelievably strong, sweetie. I don't think I would have survived this." Sarah broke down and cried out loud for the very first time since the morning she found the tablet. She buried her face in her mom's shoulder and sobbed for a solid 5 minutes. Then she blew her nose, splashed cold water on her face, and went to give the baby a bottle. The lab results arrived on a Wednesday during lunch. Nicole called her personally. Her voice had that slight tremble of a professional trying desperately not to scream with triumph. "Sarah, are you sitting down? I'm standing by the stove." "Sit down." Sarah sank onto a kitchen stool. Probability of paternity: 99.9%. Liam is 100% his biological son. Game, set, match, babe. Sarah held the iPhone to her ear, staring blankly at her own hands resting on her lap, and felt absolutely nothing. No joy, no victorious thrill, only a massive, crushing exhaustion and a grief too deep for words. Because the man who had picked out the name for this boy, who had collapsed in tears of joy in the hallway holding a pregnancy test, who had stood in blue scrubs in the delivery room, had been willing to turn his own flesh and blood into a blackmail tool to protect his bank account. No DNA test could ever erase that fact. "Thank you, Nicole. That's not all, honey. Remember I subpoenaed that fertility clinic?" the legal department responded. "They have zero record of Ryan ever being a patient. That isn't even their current letterhead. The stamp was fabricated, and the doctor's name on the bottom doesn't exist in their system. We are dealing with textbook forgery of medical records, a Class 3 felony in this state, Sarah, and we have strong circumstantial evidence tying it to Lauren. Turns out, she used to work admin at a diagnostic lab. She had access to outdated templates. We are going to drop a nuclear bomb on them at the settlement conference. Drop it, Sarah said quietly. Burn it to the ground. The divorce proceedings dragged on for another 2 months. Backed into a corner by irrefutable evidence and likely chewed out by his own lawyer, who undoubtedly explained the terrifying reality of state prison for felony forgery, Ryan became very docile. He stopped sending the unhinged midnight texts. He showed up to the final hearings in complete silence, wearing a dark suit and tie, looking at the floor. The division of assets went exactly by the book. Sarah was heavily protected. The money from her grandmother's inheritance was officially recognized as non-marital property, securing her financial footing. The judge awarded Sarah sole legal and primary physical custody of Liam, with Ryan getting highly restricted visitation. The court slammed Ryan with maximum state guideline child support and spousal alimony. Ryan walked away with nothing but his car. It was his only tiny victory in a humiliating, scorched earth defeat. Lauren fell off the face of the earth long before the judge signed the final decree. The second she realized that, instead of riding off into the sunset with a wealthy, unattached man in a luxury condo, she was facing a potential criminal investigation for forgery, massive alimony deductions from her lover's paycheck, and a catastrophic HR scandal, she dumped him overnight. During a recess out in the courthouse hallway, Sarah accidentally overheard Ryan whining to his lawyer that Lauren had packed up and moved back to her mother's house in the Midwest. Sarah realized with mild surprise that she didn't care at all. She felt nothing. Ryan tried to approach her only one more time, after the final judgment was entered. Summer was fading into fall. A warm breeze was blowing through the city. The first dry leaves crunched under the tires of the stroller as Sarah walked slowly down the paved path of the local park. Liam was about to turn 9 months old. He sat upright in the stroller wearing a tiny baseball cap, intensely studying a flock of pigeons pecking at the sidewalk. Ryan stepped out from behind a park building, acting as if it were a coincidence. His jacket was unzipped. He looked pale and completely drained. "Sarah, can I just have a minute?" "Talk." "I'm sorry I ruined everything. I get it now. I fell for her lies. I believed the BS she fed me. She played me for a fool, but my brain was just broken after Liam was born. I lost my grip. I felt rejected, completely useless in that apartment. I felt like a piece of furniture. I didn't know how to handle it." Sarah leaned over the stroller and adjusted Liam's little cap. The boy grabbed her index finger hard, with genuine, surprising toddler strength, his whole chubby hand wrapping around it. She stood up straight. "Ryan, you weren't terrified that he wasn't your child," Sarah said. "You were terrified that he was your child. Because if he was yours, it meant you actually had to step up and be a father. You couldn't treat our apartment like a hotel anymore, and you couldn't treat us like an inconvenience. You just didn't want to be a dad. That's what this was always about." He stood frozen in front of her. He opened his mouth, then shut it. He realized she had hit the absolute core of the truth. He nodded once, slowly turned around, and walked away down the park path in the opposite direction. He walked with the heavy, dragging steps of a man who suddenly realizes he has absolutely nowhere to be. Sarah watched his back for exactly a fraction of a second, then smiled, turned the stroller around, and pushed it toward the playground. Liam celebrated his first birthday in early spring. The rainy season had finally given way to bright sunshine. The condo courtyard smelled of wet earth and fresh mulch. Tiny green buds were erupting on the oak trees lining the sidewalk. Sarah threw a modest but beautiful party on the small, round kitchen table. Nothing over the top. A homemade roast chicken, a big bowl of potato salad, a classic New York cheesecake baked by her mom, and a personal-sized smash cake with a single candle in the middle. The candle was a little crooked. Liam immediately tried to grab the flame, so Sarah had to slide the cake back a few inches. Her inner circle was there. Her mom had driven in. Nicole was sitting by the window. Over the last year, she had evolved from Sarah's attorney into something closer to an older sister. An old college roommate was there with her husband and their toddler daughter. Even Mrs. Higgins from the 3rd floor came down, bringing her perpetually happy Maltese, who immediately vanished under the table to hunt for rogue pieces of roast chicken. The kitchen was packed and loud. Everyone was joking, telling stories, snapping iPhone photos of the birthday boy. Mrs. Higgins was currently telling a story about how her now-adult son cut his first tooth, and it came in so crooked they thought he'd look like a pirate for the rest of his life. Sarah's mom enthusiastically served everyone massive slices of cheesecake. Liam sat in his high chair, looking incredibly handsome in a brand-new, crisp, white button-down shirt, When Sarah lit the wick on the smash cake, the boy froze, staring at the dancing flame with total fascination in his huge, dark eyes. His eyelashes were exactly the same long, curled at the ends, inherited from the man who was gone. The dimple in his chin deepened sharply as he smiled an adorable, gummy smile at the light. Sarah leaned over him, and together, she blew out the flame on his behalf. Everyone at the table erupted into cheers and applause. Right beside her, on the kitchen counter, plugged into the charger, lay her iPhone. The screen suddenly lit up bright white. A new notification. Sarah reached out and picked it up. For a fraction of a second, the blink of an eye, a phantom knot tightened in her stomach, an echo of that morning a year ago. In this exact kitchen, in the exact same way, the screen of someone else's tablet had lit up and shattered her reality. It was an automated email notification from the State Family Court e-filing portal. Decree of dissolution of marriage entered. Case closed. Records transferred to archives. A dry, bureaucratic digital receipt. No congratulations. No well wishes. Sarah read it carefully. She locked the screen and placed the phone face down on the counter next to her coffee mug. Then, she lifted her head. At that exact moment, Liam reached his chubby, banana-covered hand out toward her. It was warm, impossibly tiny, yet pulsing with so much vibrant, undeniable life. Sarah leaned down and scooped the boy up with all her strength, hugging her most precious treasure to her chest. A year ago, one accidental message caught out of the corner of her eye on a stolen screen had nearly destroyed her world. But today, standing in a sunlit kitchen surrounded by her true family and friends, Sarah knew one thing with absolute, unshakable certainty. That discovery hadn't destroyed her world. It had saved it. It had saved her from a weak, cowardly man who wanted to twist the blessing of a child into a legal weapon. A man who tried to turn their shared love into financial blackmail, and who attempted to reduce his own flesh and blood to a bargaining chip. Ryan thought that a forged document, pathetic conspiracies in fake doctors' offices, and a gaslighted wife would buy him an easy ticket to freedom. He had miscalculated horribly, achieving the exact opposite. True freedom had been born from a painful, ugly, naked truth. And thanks to that truth, it was a freedom Sarah now owned forever.